You go to the car dealer, you negotiate the price on the car that you want, sign all the paperwork, get the keys, the registration, and when you get home, you find out that the car dealers charge you maybe $3, $4, or $5,000 more than you negotiated at the time of the sale. How can this happen? Hi, my name is Lyngklip. I'm a consumer protection attorney from Southfield, Michigan, and I love my job. Every day I get to help real people with real problems, fighting back against car dealers, debt collectors, and credit bureaus, trying to make things right for the consumers who they do business with. Today I want to talk to you about what happens when a car dealership changes the price on the sale of a vehicle after it's been negotiated and finished as a transaction with the consumer. Now, we see these happen a lot in my office, and it almost always comes up in the connection of a subprime financing deal. And a subprime financing deal is a deal where the consumer has less than perfect credit, sometimes referred to as bruised or damaged credit. Usually somebody who's below 600 on a FICO score, and those people are trying to reestablish credit or trying to find transportation so they can reestablish their credit. Now, the reason that we see these deals occur most in subprime financing deals is that in a typical cash transaction, the consumer is going to walk into the dealership and they're going to be paying with cash, which means that if a car dealer tries to change the price on them at the time of the transaction, the consumer is going to notice because they're going to have to come up with an extra $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000, and they'll say, hey, wait a minute, that is not the price that we negotiated. On the other hand, when you're doing a finance deal, the only thing that the consumer is going to be paying at the time of the transaction when they're getting the keys and the title for the vehicle is they're going to have to put down the down payment, or they're going to have to sign over a trade-in. It's not going to show up as immediately to the consumer, and the only place that they're going to find this is in the car deal documents. So if they're going to find it, it's going to be when they're looking over usually the retail installment sales contract, which is referred to as the car note, and most often in the form of the Truth in Lending Act disclosures or the itemization of the charges. And most people, when they are at the dealership, the last thing they want to be doing is reading those papers and fly-specking those for the numbers. But that is exactly what the car dealers are counting on, is that you're not going to be looking through this. They're going to try and rush you through this. So in a financing transaction, if the consumer's only putting down $1,000 or $2,000 on an $8,000 car, they're going to be looking for their down payment. They're not looking for the total price of the vehicle. And most often, they are not going to actually know where to look to see that extra $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 upcharge that the dealer is going to impose on them. Now, there's a more important reason why it is that these kinds of really large upcharges or scams show up in financing deals rather than in cash transactions. And that is because most often the reason that these upcharges show up is because of the fact that the financing has occurred through a third-party financing company. And usually there is a charge that has been imposed by that finance company on the dealer, which is referred to as either an acquisition fee or a discount fee. And when the finance company imposes this charge on the car dealer in turn is going to pass that cost on to the consumer. And they are going to do everything in their power to make sure that the consumer does not know that that charge has been imposed on them. They're going to do everything they can to hide it, to rush the transaction, because the consumer's usually been there for a very long time. That consumer's going to want out of the car dealer at that time as well. So with that as background, let me talk a little bit about how it is that car dealers make their money in the financing transaction, so you get a little better idea how this charge arises and when to be looking for it. So at the outset, car dealers want to be in the business of selling cars, not collecting payments. So you don't usually see car dealers sending out notices and payment and coupon books. And if they do, you know that you're usually dealing with what's called a buy here, pay here kind of a dealer. The car dealer wants to make its money at the time of the sale. They want to make the money off the car. They want to make the money off the special products they can sell you after the sale, known as aftermarkets or soft add-on products. And they don't want to bother with trying to hunt down payments from a consumer after the fact. They leave that to companies who specialize in that kind of business activity, and those are finance companies and banks. They have payment centers, they have call rooms, boiler rooms to make courtesy calls. They have accounting methods for tracking those payments when they come in and amortizing them and making sure that the appropriate charges are there. Car dealers do not want to be in that business. They want to get their money at the time of the sale. So when a car dealer has a customer who wants to finance a vehicle, what they're going to do, rather than taking payments on the car for the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to try and find a finance company that is going to be willing to accept payments from the consumer who's sitting across the table from them. And they're going to try and make a match between those two people. And they're going to do that before they send this car out on the road with the consumer. And before the car dealer can finalize that deal with the customer, they're going to make sure that they have already finalized the deal that they expect is going to be had with the finance company. In other words, they need to have a finance company that is willing to accept payments from a customer. Now, this is the part of the deal that most consumers know about when they go to the dealership. They know this process of matching the consumer to the finance company as the approval process. And when consumers get approved by a finance company, that means that the finance company has agreed. Yeah, car dealer, you sell this car to Mr. Jones over here, and we will then buy Mr. Jones's car note, his obligation, also known as a retail installment sales contract. We will buy that from you, and then Mr. Jones can make his payments to us, the finance companies. So that is the way that it normally goes. And if a consumer is a consumer who has reasonably good credit, something 600 and above, the car dealer is not going to have any problem matching that deal to a finance company that wants to take the payments. And what the car dealer is going to do is negotiate with the finance company about the appropriate rate of interest that the finance company is going to want to see on that contract in order to make that transaction profitable for the finance company. And so if Mr. Jones has damaged or slightly damaged credit, he may see that he has to pay 10, 11, 12, 15% interest before the finance company is going to be willing to buy that transaction from the dealer. So in an ordinary routine car deal, what you would see is that negotiation process occurs at the dealership with the car dealer telling Mr. Jones the rate of interest that he's going to have to pay in order to get approved by the finance company. And once there's an appropriate rate of interest that's agreed on, and Mr. Jones buys the car from the dealer turns around and sells that retail installment sales contract to the finance company for the face value of the contract, meaning that if Mr. Jones buys the car for $10,000, the finance company is going to buy the contract from the car dealer at $10,000, and Mr. Jones is going to make his payments then to the finance company. Now, that's what happens in an ordinary transaction. You see that the face value of the contract is, in fact, the value that winds up being the agreed price for the purchase from the finance company. However, in a subprime deal, this changes. So imagine instead that Mr. Jones has a neighbor, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith does not have good or slightly damaged credit, but has really awful credit or very badly damaged, or has a bankruptcy that they're just recovering from. Mr. Smith represents at that point perhaps a much higher credit risk. And in fact, the dealer at that point, because the state of Michigan limits the amount of interest that can be charged by a car dealer to a consumer to 25%, there may be no finance company that's willing to buy from Mr. Smith that finance contract at 25% interest. In other words, Mr. Smith may represent too much of a risk for any finance company to take payments over time, given the fact that he has bruised or damaged credit. So, in those circumstances, the finance companies will impose an extra fee that gets charged to the dealer and that fee is called an acquisition or a discount fee. And the fee can be pretty much anything that the finance company wants, but usually what we see that those fees amount to are $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And that can be true on transactions, and we've seen that happen in transactions which were at a cash price as low as $6,000. So you might see Mr. Smith going out the door with a car deal at $6,000, and instead of paying $6,000, Mr. Smith is going to have to pay $6,000 plus a discount fee of $3,000 or $4,000, which means that that car, which is initially really only worth $6,000, he now has to pay $10,000 for plus 25% interest. That is the effect of the discount fee. And the reason that it comes up is that in many instances where we see consumers walking into our office, the car dealer has already negotiated the price of the car with the consumer before they've sought to get approval. And they don't really know who they're going to sell the contract, the retail installment sales contract, to after the transaction. They don't know which finance company is going to finance Mr. Smith. So if they've already struck a price with Mr. Smith for the car, whatever that car is, at $6,000, and they later find out that the only place that they can get him financed is at ABC Finance Company, and that finance company wants a $3,000 discount fee, the car dealer will then hide that discount fee in the paperwork and pass that cost through to Mr. Smith. And that's where we see this happening most often. So the question is, how do you spot this before it happens to you so A, you don't get taken, and if you do get taken, you can try and get your money back? So in the first instance, before you go buying a car, a used car in specific, and you're going to finance that car, make sure that you have taken a look at your credit report and you know what your credit score is and whether or not you have damaged credit. If you have a credit score that's below 620, you may be a prime target for a discount fee, which means you may have to pay more for the vehicle before you can get financed. You need to know this before you start shopping for the vehicle. And if you have a credit score that is that low, you may want to get the assistance of somebody that you know to either co-sign for this vehicle or help you out with the down payment so you can put more money down on this vehicle and not have to show this discount fee before a finance company is willing to finance you in the transaction. So that's the first thing. Forewarned is forearmed. Make sure that whatever you do, find out what your credit score is before you go to the car dealer. And if you don't know how to do that, you can order up a free copy of your credit report on my website at www.consumerlawyers.com. In the resources section, there's a free letter that will allow you to order up a free copy of your credit reports from all the big three credit reporting agencies. There's no charge, and you don't have to leave an email to get the letter. Just go through, click on it, and there will be an MS Word document that you can download with envelopes and order up those credit reports. So that's the first thing. The second thing is make sure that you know the price of this vehicle when you are negotiating the price of the vehicle and getting ready to sign the documents. And when you are ready to sign those documents, you want to look at the cash price of the vehicle as it's listed in the car note. And usually, if you're signing this this transaction on paper, the car note or the retail installment sales contract is usually a document that's on 11 by 17 paper. It is very long. It is unmistakable because of this format that it is this long, and it is written on both sides of the contract. Now, at the top of that document, you will see a box, and the box is referred to as the Truth in Lending Disclosures, or a Schumer box. And just below that box, one of the first things that you'll see below that box is an itemization of the cash price for the vehicle. That's where you look. That cash price needs to match the price that you have negotiated for that vehicle. And it will be on your buyer's order, and it should also be on the application for your Michigan title when you go in and buy that. So those three numbers should match very closely to each other. And if you see that that vehicle is now more, you will now know that you are being taken advantage of and somebody is trying to add in a finance charge or a discount fee or an acquisition fee into the price of that vehicle. Now, if you wind up finding out that a dealer has actually included that discount fee or acquisition fee into the price of the vehicle, or that you've got an extra $2,000, $3,000, or $4,000 added to the price of the vehicle that you had no idea was going to be there. If that happens, what you're going to need to do is make sure that you can establish two things. Number one, you want to be able to establish what the price of that vehicle is. So you need to immediately make sure that you've got copies of any advertisements, texts, emails, or voicemails that you have from that car dealer that memorialize the price of the vehicle that you were expecting to pay at the time of the transaction. And then the second thing is that you want to ask the dealership. You want to get information from the dealership about why it is that that price changed. If you have texts, emails, voicemails explaining this, all the better. But sometimes you may have to get this information in a phone call. And if you are in the state of Michigan and you have recorded this call, that evidence about the reason for that increase in the charge for the vehicle is going to be really important evidence for you if you need to try and get that money back. So that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate it. If you have any other questions or comments, please leave them below and we'll respond to them. You can visit me at www.consumerlawyers.com, and don't forget you can order your credit reports for free on my website in the resource page. Thanks for watching. I'm Lyngklip.